Welcome everybody back to Central Tabletop Gaming. I am your host, Jeremy Kelly, and today we will be ranting about the Tau. Now, the Tau are a relatively new race to the Warhammer 40k universe. For those of you who did not know, out of all of them, do not quote me on this one, I do believe they are the newest real faction in the sense of one of the primary factions, not one of their sub-factions. And the Tau have a lot of pluses, but today we are going to complain about, obviously, why I cannot stand the Tau. And to begin, the first thing I'm going to say is the Tau are a shooty army. Now that seems like a great thing in the Warhammer 40k universe, but that does give them one drawback. They are very, very weak when it comes to melee combat, and that tends to bite them in the rear end very quickly and causes any army that can get in their face just to almost instantly overrun them with no sense of mercy. And to a game where it's about both speed, precision, and cunning, a Tau player has to be able to keep the enemy so far out of their range, because if they get into melee, they know they're done. Now, I am going to mention this much. I love pulse rifles. I have a Tau army. I'm still working on upgrade. All I have is a battle force. One of the boxes you can buy where it comes with a pariah, 2 squads of fire warriors, 3 crisis suits. I believe that's it. And I will say this much. I love the pulse rifle over the pulse carbine. I would rather be able to say for the next 5 turns, I'm safe from you for the most part, especially if you're a melee army, because most units move at 6 inches. The pulse rifle fires at 30 inches. That's a good time to sit there and just gun down the enemy for a while. But again, like I said, if they get into my range, I am going to be ripped to shreds. And that's not something any player wants to watch happen to their men, because it's very demoralizing for the player, let alone it's going to definitely show on the battlefield how quickly units can get slaughtered, and no one wants that. So, another thing I cannot stand about the Tau is the fact that if you really want to balance the army, you really have to include the auxiliary units, such as the Vespid and the Kroots. Now, if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize in advance, but I'm going based on what other channels have said. Thank you for posting your videos. I will mention who you are down the road. And for the Tau, the Kroots and the Vespids, they make great additions, but they also make their great flaw of reliance. The Kroot by far can handle the melee a lot nicer than a Tau fire warrior, and a Vespid will definitely get into combat and be able to do things much quicker than your standard fire warrior as well. So for someone like me who prefers fast-paced tactics, the Tau can seem even flawed in that department. Now, I say that, and I also will admit that they have a lot of quick units. So, the mechs are nice, but really I view more of the universalness to be more of my bonus for them, because you can switch so much out. But then when you start adding things like the pariah, I'm trying to think of what they're called, the thunderhead tanks, the hover tanks, the devilfish, it definitely speeds up the process. Their flyers are actually pretty good in my personal opinion. I've never actually got to play with one, but from what I've read, they're supposed to be really nice. And a lot of people say that the Tau have some of the best pilots, but I've watched a lot of YouTube videos involving battle reports, and again, I'm still working on mine, and I will actually have an announcement on that at the end of this video for those of you who are curious. But when it comes to the Tau, you just don't see them with their flyers, so I have to wonder, are they really that good if no one is using them, or is it just, no one has a point in using them, they got other purposes. Another thing I see with the Tau is you tend to do feint strategies. Now, to those of you who do not know what a feint is, it's when you take your army, you push it forward, and then as soon as, the enemy is within range, you start pulling back. In other words, it's kind of like you would say a tactical retreat, but usually you're luring them into a trap like more firepower. For my Necrons, I tend not to do feint strategies, because I'd rather just get the first line to attack you, follow it by a second line, third line, and then get rid of you with the fourth, if I even need the fourth. Usually I don't get past the second. Again, battle reports to be done in the future. And that is an amazing little thing, because it actually makes your opponent not be able to fight back. I do mostly annihilation games where points are not necessary. So things like your data cards, aka your objective cards, almost are non-existent, but I have done it with them and it makes a bit of a trick. So with the Tau though, one thing I like about them is that feint strategy, but at the same time that's their big drawback. Because once you get your units close to the front, that's usually where your objectives are. If you have to start pulling back, it's not going to help. It's actually going to bite you in the rear end, because what changes is you're not on the aggressive. You're on the defensive. And for an army in 40k that's about taking objectives, you want to stay on the aggressive. So the Tau lack in that department so much. Now, I've been told by several people with their Tau army they can annihilate things like my Monolith turn 1 and literally wipe my board by turn 2. I've never seen it happen, so I'm just going to say maybe it could happen, but there's no promises. Now, the Tau have a lot of great firepower, but again, it's the armies that can outnumber them. I'm honestly thinking once I have my guards, my Imperial Guards up and moving, the Astra Militarum is just going to flatten them. You've got too many units for them to keep gunning down. I noticed one thing with the Tau army is that they lack AoE quite a bit. There's a handful out there, but there's not very many. And I can only imagine that's going to turn into a huge drawback with the Tau. When I look at the Tau and I see that they have hardly any AoE, I honestly will say that means I can get in your face so much easier as long as I can outnumber you. And things like, again, my Necrons, that just means I'm just going to reanimate on sight, and who cares? Honestly, as nice as the Tau are, their big drawback is the same tactic they're best at. Now, tactics aren't the only thing I have against the Tau. Actually, I'm going to be targeting another company with this here because I love and hate their video games, Halo. I have said it before in one of my other videos and I forgot which one it was. I think it was top 10 things I hate, sorry, top 5. I'm working on a top 10. Things I cannot stand about Warhammer or hate about Warhammer, something like that. And I made the comment that the Tau are very similar to the Covenant from Halo. Now, I'm going to go a little more into the details of that. If you don't know what Halo is, you've lived under a rock. Because you probably know more about Halo than you know about the Tau, to be honest. But in case you don't, and you're more of a Halo fan, hopefully this may or may not interest you in playing the Tau, because there are good reasons to play the Tau. I may do another series on things I love about each army, because every army I have complained about, I actually love and hate, no matter what it is. Even though I hate the Ultramarines, you guys will eventually hear I like them for certain reasons as well, but that's not what this video is about. So the Tau and the Covenant from Halo are so similar it's almost scary. The regular Tau itself would seem a lot like the Elite. They're the best soldiers available to the Tau. They're always on the front lines. They're some of the most battle-hardened, in my personal opinion, of the Tau. But then I look at the Kroots, and you can see a day and night difference between the Kroots and the Jackals. The Kroots have this weird mane thing going down the back, like the old Jackals had in Halo. And their best thing they're good at is ambush style tactics. Well, I played enough Halo to know what a beam rifle feels like when a well-trained jackal is aiming at you. And that makes it hard to want to move forward. And with the Kroots, not only can they do that, unlike the jackals from Halo, they can actually get into melee a lot easier by ambushing you. And that can rip an opponent apart quickly if they're not prepared for it. The Vespid are very much like the drones from Halo as well. You look at the little things, they just come on in and will just shred you to pieces just by literal sheer numbers. I'm not going to swear at this, but I believe you can have 15 in a squad. I think they start as squads of 5. They either get 8 to 10, don't make me swear to it, more units. I'm not looking at the Tau book right now, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I know you can get a lot out there that can get a lot of firepower. They use pulse carbines, and when you get them in rapid fire range, I can only imagine how harsh that's going to be to an enemy. Now, I say that, and I'm going to also say that because they're going to rapid fire you, it means that you're going to again lose units so quickly. I don't know how quickly most players can quickly reinforce that line that started to fall, because once they're done with that, they're going to move on. And I believe because they count as a jump unit, they move at 12 inches. I know with my Praetorians that 12 inches adds up quick, especially against the things like the Tau, because instead of moving that 6 inches, you're moving 12 inches. The Tau cannot move with a feint fast enough to stop you, and that's going to help overwhelm them. But when I look again at the Tau in the comparison to the Halo army, that's very similar to the drones. They would quickly come in, wreck whatever they could, and just keep on going. Now, another unit that I looked at with the Tau that was so similar to Halo, and probably the most obvious in my personal opinion, is the Pariah in the Ghost from Halo. The Ghost is a little itty-bitty one-seater that skims around the battlefield and just, in my personal opinion, annoyed the tar out of me more than anything, because they didn't hardly kill me, they just annoyed me. But when I sat back and think about it, the Pariah looks just like a two-seater variant with actual sides or door kind of looking things on it for the pilot to sit down in. And I'm going to say this much to all you Halo fans: it would be much more devastating than what you had to face. A fusion blaster in the front would be basically a heavy hitting cannon instead of those little, I'm going to make the sound effect, pew pew things that came out of the Ghost. But if I leave it with a burst cannon, I'm putting down a lot more firepower than that same gun from the Ghost. So again, it's very similar, very different, but really we're just going to have to admit this. It is a copy and paste. It goes right back to Warhammer. Now, another thing I seen a comparison with, and this one may or may not be as accurate as I'd love to make it sound, but it's not from Halo, it's actually from Mass Effect, and shout out to that game is another one I love. Mass Effect had these drones at the beginning of the game, of the first Mass Effect, that kill Jenkins. These little drones, in my opinion, look very similar to the drones from Mass Effect to the Tau's drones, specifically the gun drone. The fact it can sit there and just lay down suppressive fire was very similar to what I've seen with the drones from Mass Effect. And it makes it so obvious to a person who's played Warhammer and these games, because we see it and we're like, oh wow, copy paste, okay. I'm not mad at it, I'm really not, but it's really obvious. Now, drones are kind of a generic design, so I'm not going to say Mass Effect copied Warhammer 40k, but I am going to say it gives a sense of familiarity. Again, Halo may or may not have copied Warhammer 40k, but I'm going to say this much, it certainly seems like it. Now, I'm going to bring up one more unit that to me is a huge comparison, and that is the Ethereals to the Prophets in Halo. The Ethereals are viewed as these godlike entities. They guide things for the greater good. We'll get to that topic here in a minute for my complaints. And then you look at the Covenant, and I forget what they called it, but basically their path to righteousness, where they want to activate the Halo rings. And you see that, and to me it was just so obvious what they're doing. Because again, I played enough Halo to know where this is going. It sounds like a great idea. It is a great way of going about things. But in the end, there was a much darker goal in mind than what they made obvious. So, the Prophets and the Ethereals, they're also very similar because they're both viewed as these shining gems. But when you break it down, they're so fragile, and there's so few of them. Now, that's where I'm going to bring up another point, is fragileness amongst the greater good. As everyone knows, the Arbiter from Halo betrays the Prophets. Well, he also was a sword wielder when you look at most his big things. And another famous sword wielder in one of the only real melee units for Warhammer 40k's Tau was Commander Farsight. Commander Farsight used the Dawnblade. And that Dawnblade was one of the most powerful swords in the Warhammer universe. Well, I remember playing a little bit of Guardians, Halo 5 Guardians, and the Arbiter had a very different looking sword. Now, maybe it was just that one scene, but it looked more powerful when you looked at it. It had more of an orange tint rather than the traditional blue-purple color that you see. And I just remember he could one-shot almost anything with that sword. Now, granted, you never got to use that sword, which was, sad to see, but whatever. And it just reminds me so much of Commander Farsight. Now, I'm going to say this much. I actually played Halo way before I ever got into Warhammer. And I actually was playing Halo 5 before I ever picked up a book on the Tau. And I never even heard about them as a faction, minus, verbal here and there. But I had never even seen a picture of the Tau. So the first time I looked at the Tau, I immediately thought the Covenant. So when I say they're similar, I'm saying it because I'm a fan of Halo, as much as, I have controversy already with their new stuff. But I'm also a fan of the Tau because that familiarity is kind of nice to see. It's not something you see a lot of in games. They're always similar, but not similar enough. And that made it to where I felt like if I knew anyone trying to get into Warhammer, I could easily redirect them. But another thing with the Tau, I'm sorry, I had to rant there for a second. If you're going to enter someone in Warhammer, the Tau might be an easy one to get them into right away. So, with Warhammer, I'm going to mention one more thing, and that is for my rant on the Tau, is the greater good. The Tau seem to lovingly tell you, we fight for the greater good, but what is the greater good? Now, I looked this up on an app I have by Fandom, which is a wiki, basically, for Warhammer 40k. Now, I am not sponsored by them. This is just a huge shout out and a thank you for them for making such a wonderful app for me to work with. And I looked up the greater good. Well, it told me such a bare bones basic of the greater good, it still leaves that one question, what is the greater good? So you never figure it out, and that just annoyed the tar out of me. So I have to wonder, going back to the Halo thing and the prophets, is the greater good necessarily the greater good? Good being the key word there. I don't know if the word good even belongs in the sentence. Is it actually a darker concept? So, shout out to 40K Theories, because I want to ask them, and if they already have one, please someone comment below, what is the greater good? Is the greater good actually a greater evil? So, I'm going to summarize that there, and I'm going to give my personal opinion on something from 40K Theories, because they brought this up and I had actually discussed it with a friend like 2 weeks right before the video had popped up, so it's not something that I was a secretive person of. The Tau, it mentioned, could the Necrons be related to the Tau? Do they have a common ancestor? Now, I don't remember the title of the video. Please just look up this guy's channel. He's amazing with his videos, and I would really like to see him get more attention, as well as some of the other channels I watch. Now, he mentioned this, and if you look at the basic facial structures of a Tau and a Necron, they are very similar. They have similar style weaponry, similar style tactics. Part of me has to wonder if the Tau are eventually going to go more melee, because the way I see it is the Necrons are very much a ranged army, but they have few, very select melee happy units, and I'm kind of hoping with that, with the Commander Farsight, you know, branch off, if the Tau can get more melee, and that would be just a huge flare for me, because I love the Tau because they are similar enough to my Necrons. I own both armies. I'm very proud of both armies, and I would really like to know, really I'm asking Gamers Workshop, are the Tau related to the Necrons? Again, if you want more information on that theory, and honestly some more information that I'm not openly going to mention, so you do have to look up his channel, please look up 40K Theories. The guy is absolutely amazing with what he does, and I am very proud to say I am subscribed to his channel. So, again, thank you so... Oh, by the way, not subscribed using Central Tabletop Gaming as a channel. Subscribe using one of my personal things for a channel. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun watching this. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. And I will hope to see you all again in the next video. Bye.